Hey guys, welcome back to my channel, or welcome if you're new here. So today we are doing my March and April reading wrap up. This is my second reading wrap up for the year, which is super exciting. I have lots of books to show you. I'm very proud of the amount of books that I've read for the past 2 months. A lot of the books from March I'd been reading for a while, so it was really good to finally finish them. And I'm so excited to show you what I've been reading, so let's just get on with the video. So the first book I finished for March was Iron Flame by Rebecca Ross. This is the second book in the Fourth Wing series. I started reading this book on its release day. Like I went, bought it, started reading it, and it's just taken me... It took me so long to finish it. I ended up mainly reading it on my Kindle, and even on my Kindle it just took a lot to read. I think the main thing that slowed down my reading was the pace of the book was so different to Fourth Wing. Fourth Wing was such a fast-paced book. Like you had different events happening all within a span of so little pages, and it was just really good. It was such a fast-paced book. Everything was happening. And then this book slows down so much for like the first 200 pages. Like it was a bit of a drag to get through. After that, it did speed up a little bit, but just those first 200 pages just took so much of me to actually get through and read. It took so much brain power. And so in that way, it was a little disappointing that it didn't have the same pace as Fourth Wing, and I wasn't getting the same vibe as Fourth Wing. I wasn't getting the same obsession with Fourth Wing, which was really disappointing and sad because I genuinely really loved Fourth Wing. I think it's in one of my reading challenges from last year. So I ended up only giving this one a 3.25 stars just because it took so long for me to get through, but the ending really did kind of bring the rating up from what it was going to be. I'm still on the fence and debating on whether I'm going to continue the rest of the series. I might pick up the third book, see how I go with that one, and that'll kind of dictate whether I complete the series or just kind of leave it there or off with this one. So the next book I finished is another chunky one, and that is House of Flame and Shadow by Sarah J Maas. This is the third book in the Crescent City series. Now again, this one also did take me a little bit to complete. I think the release date was end of January that this came out. So I finished it pretty early in March, I believe. Like both of these were finished like within a couple days of each other. I did listen to the audiobook of this one like I did with the last 2 books in the series as well. If I'm being honest, I really don't remember too much of what happened in this book. I just remember there was lots of caves. That's really all. I remember just being in cave scenes so much throughout this book. That's the main thing I remember. As far as I'm aware, it's just, this series is just a trilogy, and so for this to be the ending of the book, it like ties up a lot of things, but it was just a little bit disappointing compared to how the last 2 books ended on such big cliffhangers and how the rest of her series are written. I think the setting of the series itself, being that it's in like an urban type setting and it's a lot more modern, I don't know if I'm really into that within fantasy. I think with my fantasies, I really like that more like Renaissance type fantasy where they're like all in these ball gowns. I think just that's how my mind associates with fantasy, and I know that's not a limitation put on fantasy at all, and you can have multiple types of fantasy. I think that's just the type of fantasy I prefer. So throughout this whole series as an entirety, the first book, I still think I did really enjoy it. It did take a lot to get into. The series as a whole, I would recommend reading if you do like Sarah J Maas. Just note all the books are pretty chunky, like they're all thick, big books. Also, I gave this one a 3.5 stars as well. So the next book I finished was The House Across the Lake by Riley Sager. This is my first Riley Sager book, and still I'm in my like entry kind of like era of my thriller novels, and I really enjoyed this one. I picked this one up on my first trip to Melbourne this year back in February, so I started reading it then. I didn't get to finish it until again early March, but I really enjoyed it. When I did finish it, I stayed up until I think 3-4 a.m. just finishing the book because I could not put it down. I needed to know what happened. It was so good, it was so intense, and I genuinely was a little bit scared while reading it, which I kind of enjoyed. Don't know how I should feel about that, but I really enjoyed his writing and the style of thriller that this was. I'm excited to pick up more of Riley Sager's books. I ended up giving this one a 4.5 stars. Just again, I really enjoyed it. It didn't give me a full 5-star feeling, but I did really like the book. But basically what this book is about, you've got Casey, who is a famous actress, I think, within theatre. She's really big in that. I think her mum was in that as well. Her husband dies at this lake, and so she kind of just goes off the deep end and gets really into alcohol abuse. And so her mum sends her back to the lake house just to kind of escape from her normal day life and reality, and just kind of again escape. And she goes there, and it's triggering for her because that's where her husband died. This is all explained within like the first kind of chapter, but basically across the lake there's this house where a famous model and her husband moves in, and things just seem suspicious. So Casey just tries to investigate and see what's going on, and that's kind of the premise of the book. There's lots of plot twists, which was really exciting, that I did not pick up on. And kind of like you get somewhat of a past and present timeline, and so like when you're in the past timeline, that's like the main part of the story. Then you get a bit of a present timeline, and you're like, well, how does this relate back to what I've just read? And it was really well executed, and I really enjoyed it. The next book I finished was The 7 Year Slip. This is it's a supernatural type like romance, so it's mainly a romance book as well as a book about discovering yourself and dealing with grief. There's grief written about in this book. So it was written so cleverly within this book, and I really enjoyed it. It is one of my 5-star reads for this year. Like, I was listening to it and I just constantly wanted to be listening to it. Like, I'd be at work and I'm like, I just want to be listening to my book. Or I'd be doing uni work and I'm like, I just want to be listening to my book. And I really enjoyed it. I think it was such a good story. There was some fun moments. The concept is something that I know I've enjoyed in the past. So basically what this book is about is you've got Clementine, who moves into her late aunt, I believe. It's either her aunt or her grandma, I'm not too sure, and moves into her apartment after she's passed. And as she's moving in, she like goes down to like get some more boxes, comes back up, and the apartment is just as she remembered from 7 years ago when her grandma or aunt was still living there. And then she finds this random man in the apartment, and basically he's from 7 years in the past, she's from 7 years in the future, and you kind of just see how their lives interlapped when the apartment chooses to connect them again, and see how their lives are different apart from each other. And I just really enjoyed the story. Really enjoyed this one. The next book I read was The Naturals by Jennifer Lynn Barnes. I ended up reading this one on my Kindle. Again, I've been reading this book since last year. Like, it was kind of my Kindle book like since November or December last year, and it just kind of took me a while to finish it. I was just reading other books, then I was reading Iron Flame on my Kindle, and so once I finished Iron Flame, I went back to The Naturals, and I did enjoy it, and I can see how people really enjoyed it and was like giving it a 5 stars, I believe. I think it's a really liked series. I just didn't feel that 5-starness. I ended up giving it a 3 stars. Just, I think maybe because I had read it over such a long period of time that I really didn't connect to the story. I felt like we weren't really connected to the characters. We didn't get to really know the characters. We didn't get to see the characters really form a connection and connect in a way that I cared for them. It was a good book, and it was a really easy read. Like, it didn't take much brain power from me to read it, which is always good, and like I do like that in some books. Like, I like a no brain power easy read, but it's not what I was fully expecting. And I don't know, I felt like it was really short, so I felt like it could have been a bit longer so that we could build those connections and we could get more details within the mystery that was happening. The next book I have is Don't Let Go, which is a collection of 4 short stories. This was my March mystery read, so I've got a whole reading vlog out on this book. I enjoyed it for what you could enjoy it for. I explain it a lot better in the reading vlog that I have for it, but basically it's a collection of short, steamy stories, and they're not my personal fave. I've really discovered that I really like deep emotional connection romances, and I don't mind if there's spice or not, but if they don't kind of have that connection or build that connection throughout the story, I'm not as interested. I'm not a purely like, I need spice in this book for me to really enjoy it. So it was all right. I'm glad that I did read it. It's really cemented what type of romances I do really like, and I like that with the mystery reads that it is getting me out of my comfort reading zone. The last book I have for March, which is book number 7 for the month, which is a lot of books for me. I usually only read 4 or 5 books a month, is Heir of Fire. So I am rereading the Throne of Glass series, and somehow it's just worked out that I have 1 book a month. So this was my book for March. I am listening to those. This book has always been a standout for me within the series. I really enjoyed it. It's kind of where the plot of the series like takes a twist, and you kind of figure out what's really going on. You meet a whole bunch of new characters, which I was able to get more of an appreciation for the characters you meet within this book, because when I first read it I was like, I don't care, just take me back to the main plot line, I don't care about you. But now knowing how all of it ties in, I really did take more of an appreciation for those chapters with these other characters, and it really made me appreciate the story more. If it's not obvious, this was a 5-star book. It has always been a 5-star book for me. I really enjoy it. I can't really explain too much of what happens in this book because it is book around 4 in the series, depending on how you read it. But I really recommend this series. It's so good, and it's bringing out nostalgia for me while I'm reading it, because the first time I read it was back in 2020, and so it's just kind of taking me back to how my life was back then, and it's been really good to reread the series. So now moving on to April. The first book I finished in April was The Bribe. I read this on Kindle. It's on Kindle Unlimited. It is a small town, I think it's called the Calamity Montana series. It's a small town romance, and it's really good. So in this one you have Lucy, who is a big country pop star who has a stalker, and she's just trying to escape from that. So she kind of like changes her identity and moves to the small town where she finds Duke, who is the chief of police, and he's the only one in the town who knows her identity based off a mistake she made. She didn't want anyone in the town to know her identity, but it was really good. So you had the small town country element, and then you also had this other stalker situation that was happening. So it was a little bit more than just a small town romance, and I really did enjoy it. I gave it a 3.75, which is pretty good just because it's a light read. It didn't take much brain power. I did enjoy it, but it didn't fully tick over to that 4 stars, but I did really enjoy it, and I would recommend the series. I am currently reading book 2 in the series, so that's really fun. The next book I finished for the month of April was Queen of Shadows. Again, rereading the Throne of Glass series. Can't really explain much of what happens in this book because it is getting towards the end of the series now. For my reread, I gave this one a 4 stars. I really did enjoy it. It kind of has more of that political aspect into it, which I know a lot of fantasies have politics and political elements in them, and I just usually am not the biggest fan of it, even though I know it's like a big plot line for like all the battles. But I don't know, man, it's just something that I just kind of be like, yep, I know I have to deal with this. But I really enjoyed it. I enjoyed rereading it. There's obviously the one scene in there that I think everyone knows what I'm talking about, and it's just one of my favorite scenes. It pulls at my heartstrings, and I really enjoy it. I like seeing, again, the characters who I didn't have an appreciation for the first time I read the series, and taking a new appreciation for them now, and seeing how their story is changing and evolving and connecting with like the main story line that you are introduced within the first couple books of this series. So I'm really excited to continue the series because I'm listening to these books on Audible. I don't know if it's really possible for me to do the tandem read with the series, but I really want to try it because the first time I read Empire of Storms and then Tower of Dawn afterwards, and it made Tower of Dawn a little bit hard to get through. So I really do want to try and do a tandem read as much as I possibly can within the audiobooks. So I think I'm going to try that, and we'll see how long that takes me. So April was a big month for new releases. So these next books that I have to show you are all new releases, which I'm really excited that I was able to get to and experience them within their new release, because a lot of the times when there is a new release, I buy the book and then it just kind of sits there for a little bit while I'm reading other books. But the first book I have is Wild Love by Elsie Silver. This is the first book in her new series that is somewhat connected to the Chestnut Spring series. So this follows the brother of Willa, who is the main character in the second book in the Chestnut Spring series, and this follows him as he kind of reconnects with his, I think it's his best friend's younger sister, and they kind of always had a bit of a thing, but they kind of given a second chance when she moves back to Rose Hill, which is like the town over from Chestnut Springs. She moves back there after like 10 years of being away, and they kind of reconnect. They now work together. There's a kind of trope in there that I've discovered that I'm a really big fan of. A lot of people, I think, either love or hate this trope. I am a big fan of it, and I really enjoyed it. So seeing that element play throughout this book was really enjoyable, and it just creates so much more emotional attachment to the characters and how they interact with this, kind of like how they interact and deal with this trope. But I really enjoyed it. I gave it a 4.5 stars. My mum is just starting this book as well. She's also read the Chestnut Spring series and did enjoy them. I'm just excited I got to it. Also, this cover is just beautiful. I'm so excited to display this on my shelf with my Chestnut Spring series. Her covers are always really gorgeous, which is always a bonus. The next book I have is Just for the Summer by Abby Jimenez. I am such a big fan of Abby Jimenez books. I've only read this series that this book is a part of, but I really want to expand and read her other books. I just have yet to get to them, but I really enjoyed this book. There was so much more to it than I expected. When I was reading it, I didn't realize it was a part of the Part of Your World and Yours Truly books. I didn't know there was a connection, and so just kind of seeing that throughout the book, it really surprised me, and I really enjoyed it. It was such a good element to the book of being able to go back to those characters. I really enjoyed the plot line and the connection that the characters build. So basically this is kind of like a, how do I describe this? So the two main characters believe they have a curse on them that when they date someone, after they break up, the next person that person dates is their soulmate. And so they both find out that they have this kind of curse, and so they believe that if they date each other and then split up, they should both technically find their soulmate afterwards. So they arrange all these dates. The way the main guy arranges these dates is so cute, and like he puts in so much effort, and it's so good. I absolutely adored it. Plus how they also help each other deal with such deep personal things that are going on in each other's life with their parents. Just the way they deal with it themselves and then help each other deal with it. It was so good to see that they could somewhat relate to each other in that aspect as well. This is a 5-star book for me. I think all of Abby Jimenez books has been a 5-star book for me. Hence why I do really want to read her other books, and I really enjoy her writing. It's so good. The storylines are amazing. I'm so tempted to just go back and reread this series. I just really freaking love these books. Then the last book I have for this video, the last book of April, which is book 5 for April, so in my like kind of normal range, is the reappearance of Rachel Price. I finished this literally like 2 nights ago. It was so good. I got home from work at about 1:30, and I was like, cool, I'll just read a chapter before I go to bed. Wrong decision. I stayed up until 5:30 a.m. finishing this book. I could not put it down from the point I picked it up. It was so good. This was a 4.5. I really enjoyed it. Just the writing of it, it was so much more than what I expected. So this is the author of A Good Girl's Guide to Murder, which I've read that series. I think I read it not last year, but the year before. And I remember really enjoying that series. It was just, I was like, yep, it's a really good series. I really enjoyed it. I'm excited for the TV show that's coming out. But this book I loved. It was so good. The plot line was amazing. The way it was written, the plot twists that were happening, I did not expect. It was so good. So if you couldn't really gather by the title, you've got Rachel Price, who has disappeared when she was younger. Belle, her 2-year-old daughter at the time, was left in the car where Rachel disappeared. So Belle was the only one that technically knows what happened and who took Rachel Price. Then Rachel Price reappears. Then Belle's family decides to commit to this crime mystery documentary that about Rachel Price. Within that filming, Rachel Price ends up reappearing, and so you have to, like, you're kind of figuring out what happened. You have your suspects of what happened. It was really good. And you've got like the kind of similar ratio. You've got Belle and you've got Ash, in how Belle's kind of like the main instigator of things that are happening, and Ash is just kind of following along. He's recording. He's like, yep, cool, I'm gonna follow this girl around because she's mad cute. Similar relationship type to Ravi and the main girl from A Good Girl's Guide to Murder. I cannot remember her name for the life of me right now, but I really enjoyed this series, this book. This book tops that series for sure. I'm so glad I read it. So that is my reading wrap up for the months of March and April this year. I hope you enjoyed this video. I hope you liked seeing what books I read, my thoughts on those books. I'm really proud of the books I've read and what books I picked up. They were such good books. April was a good reading month for like highly rated books. I'm so excited for what May and June bring for my reading. That's all for today. Hope you liked it. Please like, comment, subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye.